Welcome to another episode of Bridging the Gap podcast, where we bridge the gap between business, technology, and people. Today, I wanted to refer to something that I was reading earlier this week that says companies poured billions, that's with a B, into AI last year. And according to PwC's latest research, they're saying 56% of CEOs, that's more than half, are reporting zero measurable revenue increase or cost decrease from their AI. Zero. So, meanwhile, less than 1% of global executives say they've seen significant ROI. So, what's going on? And more importantly, how do we fix it? That's what we're going to unpack today. So, I want to dig into why AI investments are failing to deliver ROI. I think that's probably one of the first things to be curious about. And then, second to that, is what agentic flows are and why they represent the next evolution, but only if you're ready for them. So these aren't separate problems, they're just two sides of the same coin. So I want to dig into the reality check first and foremost, though the AI ROI problem. So, some references from Forbes and PwC, like I said, they're saying that 56% of CEOs are seeing no ROI. Only 12% saw both revenue gains and cost savings. So, why is there the disparity? And what's causing this? And I think some of this is just that, AI isn't magic, it's infrastructure, and the infrastructure fails when you skip some of the steps. And I think there's a potential that some of these steps were skipped. First of all, the unclear objective. I think this is where there was maybe some lack of a scientific approach or science problem. And I say that saying, like, what problem are they even trying to solve? I think that's one of the interesting ones. We discussed this previously, this FOMO, if you will, of I just need AI in my business just so that I have AI in my business. I'm not saying don't put AI in your business, but I am saying make sure you're doing it appropriately, because if you don't know what problems you're solving, you may be actually creating more than you're actually solving. Forbes referenced this and called this the difference between companies that succeed and failure. The winners set clear business outcomes up front, choose the tech, hit those targets, no open-ended, just let's do a project. And this is why I was referencing some of that vanity AI, that FOMO AI of just, I need AI for the sake of having AI, that really hard to spell two-letter word there, versus actually value-driven AI and deploying it not just for the optics, but for the actual outcomes that they could get with it. I mean, again, we've talked about these before, but an example being a chatbot that no one uses just because it's AI involved didn't really solve any problems. Probably created some confusion, some friction, but didn't solve anything. So did you really get more bang for the buck? Or did you save some money with that by introducing that chatbot? So that's one area. I think another, and this is to me really a big one, bad data. The adage hasn't changed. Garbage in is still garbage out. And to be fair, all AI is doing is just making garbage in and garbage out at machine speed. It's faster garbage than we've seen before. This comes really because I think it's siloed systems. It's just people not really getting good, consistent formatting of their data. They don't do a warehouse with that single source of truth. So again, how can you train intelligence on chaos? I mean, what would you expect outside of that? Third point I think worth making here is there's just no workflow integrations. This is just where everything ends up being it's a constant sprawl of try the next thing, try the new thing, try whatever else someone else has tried because it's going to surely work for our business. I think that's just a big pattern for failure. You end up with tons of proof of concept, but never anything really functional or mature enough that it's going to scale and really yield you the value and the benefit. So this is kind of the like AI bolted on as a side tool, a side project, a side problem versus actually being embedded into the process and the strategy. I mean, there's kind of, we've talked about that before too, but that just slapping something on just so you can say we're AI, not really the way to go. And I think those let's redesign the workflow and redesign the process around AI instead of just handing the tool of licensing and everything else. It's just What, again, did you solve? If AI is exacerbating your problems, just slapping AI on your processes and your workflows probably didn't solve anything. There's a lack of intentionality. I think also that people just have to leave their workflow to use AI. They won't. And if it's not kind of baked into what they're doing and it becomes a helper, if you will, they're not going to. Well, let me back up and even say if they don't see it as a helper, they probably see it as opposition, and probably their direct opposition. That's another thing we'll come into later. And again, I think that the integration of this isn't optional. I mean, integrating AI into the whole system, the whole process, the whole operation. I mean, that's really what the whole point of it is. Fourth point, and then we'll move on, I think is just the cost opacity and some missing some of the governance ideas here that really technology adoption is a people problem. It's why arguably this entire podcast exists. It's for business, technology, and people because they're inextricably connected. They're not three separate things we want to look at. They go together. And this is why I say with it being a people problem, there's fear, there's skepticism, there's lack of training, there's lack of understanding. I really, really harp on the fear of executives on the FOMO side or thinking that they're really saving something, but that produces all that fear of the individual contributor where they don't know, where they just try to be replaced. That's such a huge problem to get over. But also, just is there a measurement problem or really the measurement rubric of what are we tracking and do we know if it has yielded benefit? This kind of yields back a little bit to that vanity metric piece, in my opinion, because if you're just saying we've implemented AI, check. Well, okay, fine, you did, but at what cost or at what value? It's kind of like I've said before of if you just want 1 million people on your website, there's ways to get 1 million people on your website. What does that actually do for your business? Getting 1 million impressions in an ad or getting 1 million people to download your app, like to what end? What are you hoping to solve here? Because if it didn't convert to something that was tangibly making or saving you money, I don't think it actually yielded you any benefit. And back to the people thing, I think the team, the whole team, all of the people have to trust that the system that they're going to use before they're going to even use it. Leadership, I think, are going to see the numbers before they fund it. If you're building something that people don't even trust, believe in, scared of, how are you going to get them over the hurdle to use it? So I'd say those are the diagnoses, but really let's talk about the treatment because the treatment I think is where there is good news. I think this is where we can dig into that 12% that is winning. And Forbes, again, I just use it as a reference, had some good research that shows that, there is a specific share of behaviors that we can actually learn from. So dig into that real quick. I think there's a framework. It's the remediation framework. It's just 3 phases: audit it, integrate it, embed it. This isn't theory. This is a playbook we run with clients. It's a map that directly, should say it this way. It maps out directly what is successful. What is it that the 12% that are winning with this doing? The winners embed AI into the core decision making, the strategic decisions they're making, and then they demand that it gets utilized. They push it all the way down. It's permeated top down. I'm not saying side experiments and projects and proof of concepts are bad by any stretch of the imagination. They are what prove out should you do things. But if you can prove out that it's working, then you have to make the actual fundamental financial shift of investment into using the tooling so that it really, really shows back up in the bottom line of your P&L. With that being said, I do think the audit phase of assessing what current AI initiatives do you even have, and are they tied to an actual outcome, business outcome? Subsequent to that, integration, fixing that data foundation problem. I mean, I just think, period. You could kind of end right there. Fix the data foundation problem, because if the data foundation is poor, getting the best yield of your AI probably going to be poor. Getting the best use case of everybody around it, probably going to be poor. The garbage in, garbage out problem just going to be exacerbated. So data foundation, it's key, it's critical. You have to fix it. And I think it's worth mentioning when I say data foundation, I'm fairly agnostic on your data warehouse of choice. Pick whichever one that you really want. I have my preferences. This isn't a sales pitch of which one to use, but what it is, this isn't peer-to-peer connections. This isn't syncing 75 different systems across each other because then there is no central source of truth. That's just a spaghetti monster where we're trying to send data everywhere. You can't build anything and build systems off of that because which system really wins? Is it your CRM? Is it your sales system? Is it your ERP? Is it actually the marketing and the CDP? Like, where does it actually end for where the data source began and where the data destination ended? So fix that data foundation problem and then embed it. Embed, well, really not first and foremost. Establish first, then embed those KPIs that tie to those business outcomes, not just some AI activity. This isn't just check a box that we instituted a bot or, yay, we turned on some LLM. What's it tied to? What's the operational ROI? What is the performance ROI? What's your predictive ROI? What's the strategic ROI? Governance, who owns it? Who owns AI for your company? Dig into that. And train and change management. Ongoing, not one time, is again, we're in an ever evolving ecosystem here. The data rate with which we're generating it and consuming it, all time high. AI and the change of everything we're establishing there, all time high. This isn't a one and done, set it and forget it. This is constantly leaning in and tying whatever the new thing is that's going to work for us back to the objectives, but also making sure it is tied all the way in. So I think this is where it gets interesting. Again, Forbes calling 2026 the year AI moves from experimentation to financial accountability. I mean, okay, maybe. The buying criteria is shifting. There's generic capabilities. There's workflow integrations, the governance we just mentioned, the ROI that we need. But all of that shift is opening the door to the next evolution, agentic systems. So I think that's where we kind of pull this down into what does agentic flows actually mean? What are they? First and foremost, traditional AI. You ask a question, you get an answer. I've honestly likened many of the services out there that the general layperson today would use and say that's their AI. It's just a better Google. They're asking it the same questions that they would go to Google, but now they're asking it as a question, and they might even be having what feels like a dialogue with their AI, but it's still just questions and answers, questions and answers. Agentic AI is not just questions and answers. Agentic AI is a goal-directed autonomy. It's planning, adapting. It's taking action in response to changing environments. It's not just responding to the prompt that the human gave it, but yet talking back and forth amongst itself, having workflows and procedures that it can execute. Think of it as the difference between a calculator and an assistant who can actually run the whole calculation project. Calculator, you can put in some inputs, you get back an answer. The assistant runs the whole project, calculations included, and then brings back the results. It's a very different situation. But this is real. It's happening now. Again, some stats. 62% of businesses are already testing agentic AI. 23% are implementing agents in at least one area of their operations. And by 2028, Gartner projects 1/3 of enterprise software will embed agentic capabilities. The results can be significant. The customer service agents are already showing a 50% reduction in cost per call with simultaneous improvements in satisfaction. That shouldn't be ignored. And this is why I go back. Although chatbots are very powerful, if you employ them appropriately, you really get ROI. But just trying to put a chatbot in place so that I don't have to pay someone to handle a problem, again, not done well, may create more frustration, may create lower CSAT scores, may actually cause people to churn, and you think you've done something to save time because you're not paying employees. Balance what you're looking for. I think one of the next things to cover is a single agent versus multi-agent patterns. Single agent, it's one AI handling a workflow end to end, does everything. I mean, it's good for a nice, defined, repeatable kind of process that you want to do. Think like a customer inquiry. You do some research, you draft a response, you send back the response, kind of a self-contained little thing, not a big deal. And enterprises are starting there. This is where I think we're seeing, again, the customer service bots. We're seeing contact centers utilizing this. We're seeing some of the workflow automations really utilizing this. But where this really takes off is the multi-agent side. So that's multiple specialized AI agents coordinating between themselves. They hand off a task and a tool and an output and an input between the agents with different capabilities, but specialized capabilities. So think of it this way. You have a research agent that finds the data. It gives that data to an analysis agent so that it can interpret it. That agent then hands off to a writer agent so you can get some drafts created, who is then handed off to a reviewer agent so that it can check what was actually done. That's a much different flow than just saying, do this one thing. I think this is where we're going to see development. You're going to see a lot of cross system orchestration there. You're going to see, you know, product owners and project managers creating their specs with agents who can get fed down to development agents, who can get fed down to QA and review agents, who might even be fed to DevOps agents for deployment. Again, I think this is the world we're heading towards, but I think this is going to be true across multiple things, not even just development. I mean, it could be all the way across systems. I mean, you could be triggering things and actions across CRMs and ticketing systems and billing systems and any other internal tools and alerts and everything else. I mean, this becomes your true automation. This becomes where now not one human leading one AI agent with a prompt. This is now humans overseeing teams of agents. They are your new team. But there's a risk to the reality. 40% of enterprises respondents are already worried that agents delivering incorrect information, over optimization to a single metric, can exploit loopholes and harm the other objectives. This is, again, I hate the term hallucination. I don't believe AI hallucinates. I think that gives it too much credit, but that does not mean that it doesn't elicit things based on what it believes are an appropriate answer. This is indicative of that. I also think that you have agents that can access your browsers and your file systems and corporate APIs and all this expansion, MCP servers and everything that's happening. I mean, we're just getting this massive expansion of the blast radius, if you will, of misconfigurations and attacks. That's a huge thing. Security is just, I think, also grossly underserved, but this isn't a security podcast. This is why governance is not optional. But this is also why I say the data readiness. It's a non-negotiable. You have to have the data, that central source of data. If you don't have that, how are you going to lean into all of this? How are you governing anything? How are you going to guide those agent systems in order to actually do anything and not really just amplify the problems you already have? And I mean amplify them exponentially. So bad data, autonomous decisions, as just automated mistakes at scale, we can't have that. That's how we just fall with egg on our face and we just don't recover from it. So I think this is why there still needs to be the human in the middle. This is why we're still here to be those guides and guardrails to keep the AI and the agents in check. So I think we kind of transition from there. And if we go, if these are all the problems, if that's the diagnosis, here's the problems, some of the potential solutions. How do you have the readiness check? The digital employee mindset, I think, is one first and foremost thing. Companies should view autonomous agents like their next hire. Treat it like an employee. You give it defined roles. It has managers. Those employees have KPIs they have to live up to. They have responsibilities and accountabilities that you are measuring them against. And they don't operate just in a vacuum where no one's seeing it. Like, the automation is great, but the automation with those guardrails is how you really get the most bang for the buck. So I wouldn't call it a virtual employee, maybe a digital employee. That's kind of the mode, the paradigm shift in the thinking. Like, yes, it's a bot, but treat it like it is a hire and give it the same level of critique that you would any other hire that you're going to do. I'll run through the list too on the data side because I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't harp on the data. Single source of truth. Get that data into a unified, well-modeled data warehouse. Get someone managing the data quality. So you've got to have data quality standards. You have to be able to know, is the data good? Because if you can't know that, this is all kind of moot. Go for API first architecture. I think that's a big one. A lot of people, this is building for systems to talk to systems, APIs, REST or otherwise, MCP servers. I mean, these are how we're going to actually scale these things. Don't skimp on monitoring infrastructure because, again, humans aren't going to be able to keep up with the output of the agent. So, how do we put those guardrails up and catch it in time? Well, that's the monitoring is going to be the win. Give yourself plenty of ability for rollback. So if it builds something, put the gates, put the checks, put the balances, make sure that it does things in dev and staging and UAT before it ever touches production. And there's checks along the way, but that gives you your rollback ability. I said this earlier, but the human in the middle or the human in the loop, however you want to think of it, I do think that's a paradigm where the humans need to be involved, probably in those quality gates and those checks and balances to approve or deny it moving forward. I think those are just key. And this is, again, when I tell people AI is the future that we're heading towards. It's not going anywhere. If your mentality as an individual contributor is that AI is going to take my job, it probably is. But if your expectation and your paradigm of the mentality is AI is just the new evolution of the employee I'm going to be managing, that's how you're going to succeed. And ownership. I think this is another just key one. Who is responsible when the agent misbehaves? Is it the individual contributor, the manager, the AI security officer? Like who is it? Is it governance? Who is responsible for it? And what remediation do you take to fix it? All that being said, and just kind of bring this all back together. So I think the AI ROI problem and the agentic readiness problem, I mean, they're basically the same problem. It's just different scales and different modes with which you're looking at it. Fixing the foundation now is paramount, and making sure that you're positioned for what's next, paramount. Again, just reference Forbes. Forbes put it perfectly. Serious enterprise AI leaders have stopped talking about AI and instead focus on simplifying workflows and solving concrete problems. I love this one because, in my opinion, this really AI didn't change anything. You were hiring people to solve concrete problems. And again, don't get me wrong, even researchers who are trying to figure out the problems are still trying to solve concrete problems. The individual contributors you're hiring and the managers and the directors and the VPs, they're still all trying to solve concrete problems. This goes back to why I say treat that agent like an employee. You're onboarding it to solve a specific problem. The beauty is it can work tirelessly and endlessly and give it specific focus, and it gets specific. I think this is going to be an interesting shift philosophically, almost of like the industrial revolution of specialization. It's almost that way, but now we're going back to doing agents with specialization rather than people with specialization. So I think that's going to be an interesting bit for us to really dig into. And also, I would say bringing this last two bits together is when the systems and the layers instead, I'm sorry, say it this way. When systems add layers instead of removing them, adoption slows regardless of technical promise. So companies winning with AI, they're not just buying a cool, shiny tool. Again, that FOMO side. They're actually the ones who have some problem, specific data integration, governance, whatever it is that they're wanting to solve with AI so that they can solve it faster. So this may be the year of where agentic AI moves from experiments to infrastructure. I mean, I firmly believe it is. That transition is happening, whether it's just in isolated little pilots to the agents as embedded collaborators in your ecosystem, all the way up to core business processes. but only for the companies who have that foundation. So noodle on that for a little bit. Love to chat with anybody on their opinions on data readiness and really truly embracing the AI revolution along with this agentic direction we're heading, and would love the thoughts. But until next time, hit me up in the comments. But this is Bridging the Gap.